Hey, I'm Sisi. Thanks for watching this brow transformation video. I'm going to be using my favorite eyeshadow palette by Cozzette. I'm going to be using an angled brush, and so I'm really excited to show this technique because I usually just work with pencils. But how I'm going to start is with a spoolie. This is basically a disposable mascara wand that I'm using, but you could use a spoolie from any brand. It doesn't have to be from a particular brand, but anything works. Disposable wands just don't have any mascara on it. So I'm going to start with my Sigma E65 brush. I'm going to tag it below. Of course, every single thing's going to be tagged below. And then I'm using this Dignified eyeshadow shade in my Cozzette matte eyeshadow palette. I love this shade because it's like a really cool brown. Like sometimes if the brown is too red, then it doesn't really look like brow hairs unless you've got like really reddish brown hair. But I'm just going in with the slightest touch. I started with this particular eye because it has a lot of gaps. It's like my most janky brow. I hate this brow. Like a threader like butchered this brow eons ago. I mean, I'm literally saying like 8 years ago probably, and it never grew back the same. I can still create hair-like strokes with this technique, just using an angled brush and using an eyeshadow. And I like eyeshadows honestly because it also grips the hair really well and gets in between like those little hairs, and so it creates this nice soft effect. And you know, if you take notice to where I'm holding the brush, I'm not holding it like a writing utensil. I'm holding it very far back on the brush, and so it creates a very soft and effortless deposit of product. This is not about creating dense brows. This is not about trying to make my brows look darker. It's literally just filling them in with this cool brown shade. So I'm gonna eventually use a black eyeshadow, which is really exciting, but I always start off with this cool brown shadow because I like to create a gradient with my brows. If you're noticing what I'm doing, again, take notice to where I'm holding the brush. I'm not choking it like a writing utensil. That's like epic fail number one. Don't do that. And I'm going to start with this lighter shade of brown before I actually use black. Just stay tuned for me using the black eyeshadow. I know it's a big no-no, and there's so many faux pas about using black eyeliner and black eyeshadows on your brows, but it can be done successfully without looking tacky. So I'm using an even lighter touch and amount of pressure as I get to the front of the brow. I am also changing the angle of my brush. If you take notice, I have my brush right now a lot more straight, and then as I get to the front of the brow, it's a little bit more slanted so that I can kind of make sure that I'm going in an upward, more of an upward motion than an outward motion. All these things matter because it helps with simulating the brow strokes. Now here's the fun part. I am using black eyeshadow. That same black smoky eye you saw me create in my previous video, this is the same exact eyeshadow. I'm just using it on the outer corner or the tail of the brow. So this is what kind of creates that gradient, that the outer corner, or at least the tail of the brow, is much darker. So I would not start with this particular shade, just because if you've noticed, I have not changed my brush. I'm going over it. So if I were to start in the opposite order, it would be very hard to create that soft, cool brown shade with, you know, some of the black eyeshadow on the brush, if you get what I mean. So I'm ending with this dark black eyeshadow just on the very tail of the brush because I want this brow to look very snatched. I want it to be precise, and it's gonna look super clean once I use the concealer. So I'm gonna get a little bit closer for this part, and I'm sure you'll like this, but I'm using my all-time favorite MAC Studio Finish concealer. This is my jam. Good old faithful. She has never failed me. I've been working with the Studio Finish line for over a decade. Okay. I'm using a Bdellium Tools brush. I believe this is 936. Love it. It works. This is all about positioning. I'm tilting my head a little bit just for the sake of the camera, but it's really, again, pay attention to where I'm holding the brush. This is about not applying too much pressure because I don't want to create streaks, because then it just makes it harder to blend out. But if you notice where I'm actually placing the product as I get to the top of the brow, I'm only placing it at the front of the brow. I am basically highlighting and contouring. If anyone didn't know, you do not need to bring your concealer all the way from the front of your brow to the tail of your brow. It's a technique that's just my personal preference, but I strongly recommend it to most people. Don't do it. It just makes things harder to blend out, and it allows you to avoid that ugly halo brow that we never really like. So I'm pressing my concealer in with my fingers just so it blends out so you don't really see those harsh lines. Don't worry, I'm going to clean that up a little bit later before I move to the other side. So as I said before, this particular brow is janky. Now watch how I magician the hell out of this brow. Because if you notice, it's a lot thicker than my other brow. It's not necessarily thicker. It's just that this entire brow sits lower than my right brow. So when I fill it in, it appears to be thicker, but here's how I cheat. I'm gonna cut just right underneath that brow, just a hair. So I'm actually going over brow hairs with concealer. So if you look at it from a distance, it looks like, oh, she's just got a sculpted brow. But when you use a really great full coverage concealer like the MAC Studio Finish one, you will not be able to see the brow hair. So I don't like to tweeze that area of the brow, because when I'm not wearing a brow and they're not filled in, this brow looks way too thin. So I do like to leave it for the sake of when I just want to run out of the house and I'm not wearing a brow. But the way I make them look more symmetrical and even is just by cheating a little bit and going underneath the brow and adding concealer to hide some of those brow hairs. It's a small trick, but it works in particular for me because my brows are definitely not twins. Like, they are distant cousins. I don't even know sometimes. Like, they be looking janky, okay? And they're very thin. My hairs are not dense at all, so this is what works for me. Last step is to just press in the concealer so that I reduce any harsh lines of demarcation. I do bring it down the bridge of the nose as well, but I'm really just focusing on the brow bone and pressing it in to get rid of it. I love to work with my fingers because I just think it's a realistic way for everyday glam. Like, sometimes you don't always have a brush. When I'm working with a client, I don't do stuff like this, but on myself, I never shy away from using my fingers. It just melts the product right in. And I'm always turning my head left to right to make sure that everything is blended out from all angles. Like, sometimes when you're just staring straight at the mirror, it's hard to see, you know? So turn your head side to side and make sure that everything is blended out. Now, here's the thing. I want to make sure that I set this area of my face before I'm done, because you don't want that place to get really greasy. Your forehead is an area that has a lot of movement from smiling and frowning and, you know, confused faces. So I always like to make sure that I go in with this Sigma F35 brush. It just has a residual of my mineralized skin finish powder. And this is the final look. That's it. That's pretty much it. All products will be listed in the description below. Click the links, take a look. I hope you enjoyed this. I enjoyed creating it. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Come back again soon. Thanks.